Reportedly, Meghan Markle is now on the cover of Harper's Bazaar. Okay, she's on the cover of Harper's Bazaar.
It began with a cover photo Meghan Markle believed would rewrite her entire story. A fresh start, a soft glow, a pose practiced down to the eyelash. The Harper's Bazaar photo shoot was meant to be her moment of rebirth, a quiet sign to the world that she was stepping back into the spotlight on her own terms. For a few hours, it seemed to be working. Social media buzzed, headlines circled, and Meghan's team felt confident this was the first page of a new chapter. But then came the shift. Not from critics, not from journalists, not from royal commentators, from South Park. Within hours, the show turned Meghan's glossy comeback into one of their sharpest satirical hits in years. The timing was brutal. The parody dropped just as the Harper's Bazaar interview was gaining traction, and suddenly the spotlight flipped. Instead of discussing her carefully crafted quotes or the artistic photos, people were laughing at the cartoon version of her, a version that didn't need to exaggerate much to make its point. The jokes weren't random. They targeted the exact things the public had already noticed. The dramatic tone of the interview, the poetic lines, the sense that Meghan was once again trying to rebuild her story in a way that felt overly rehearsed. And because the parody lined up so closely with the real interview, people didn't just watch it, they shared it. Over and over, until millions had seen it. Inside Meghan's camp, the mood changed fast. The Harper's Bazaar interview wasn't supposed to spark laughter. It was meant to spark admiration. It was meant to show growth, wisdom, and a new direction. But when the parody hit, it highlighted something her team didn't want to admit. People weren't connecting to the reborn Meghan the way they hoped. Instead of feeling inspired, many viewers felt déjà vu, like they had read this story before, several times, just with different lighting and different outfits. That's why the South Park parody hit so hard. It didn't create a narrative, it exposed one. And according to people close to Meghan, she felt blindsided. She reportedly asked how something meant to show strength had turned into something people mocked. She didn't understand how the interview, which she believed was powerful and honest, could be twisted into a joke so quickly. But the truth is simpler. When a public figure repeats the same themes too often, even a polished comeback can start to feel predictable. And when a narrative feels predictable, satire becomes easy. Sometimes too easy. Meghan thought she was announcing a new era. Instead, she walked straight into an unexpected storm. A storm that was about to get louder, deeper, and far more complicated than a simple cartoon episode. The South Park parody didn't just make people laugh. It shifted the entire conversation. In the hours after it aired, online reactions moved faster than any PR team could keep up with. Clips spread across TikTok and YouTube. Memes filled timelines. People who hadn't even seen the Harper's Bazaar interview suddenly felt like experts on it because the parody explained everything they needed to know. And that was the first warning sign for Meghan's team. The satire was more memorable than the story she tried to tell. Inside the Harper's Bazaar interview, Meghan spoke in long, emotional sentences. She described her journey, her growth, her struggles, and her renewed purpose. The problem wasn't the message, it was the delivery. The writing felt heavy and overly poetic, as if every line needed to sound like the opening chapter of an autobiography. That dramatic tone might have worked if the audience was fully on her side, but after years of interviews, documentaries, podcasts, and book chapters, people felt like they had already heard these themes before. So when South Park exaggerated that tone, giving the cartoon version of Meghan dramatic speeches, deep sighs, and over-the-top statements about privacy and pain, viewers didn't see a joke. They saw a reflection of how dramatic her media strategy had become. That's why the parody went viral so quickly. It didn't come from nowhere. It came from what people were already feeling, but hadn't said out loud. Meanwhile, Meghan's team watched online reaction charts like they were watching weather reports for an incoming hurricane. Every hour, the South Park clips gained more views. Every hour, fewer people were discussing the real interview. The Harper's Bazaar photoshoot, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of Meghan's comeback, was suddenly being compared frame by frame to a cartoon, and in almost every comparison, the cartoon looked more relatable than the original. That was the second warning sign when satire starts feeling more believable than the celebrity being satirized. Behind the scenes, frustration grew. Meghan reportedly asked how something meant to show strength could be twisted into comedy. She wondered why people were laughing at her instead of supporting her. But the issue wasn't the interview itself, it was the timing. The public was already tired of repeated reinvention stories. They wanted something new, something real, something unfiltered. Instead, they got another polished narrative with dramatic wording and carefully controlled messaging. South Park didn't invent the mockery. They just amplified what was already bubbling under the surface. And once Meghan realized that people were laughing not at South Park, but at her interview, the panic began to spread through her PR circle. Advisors sent late-night messages. Staffers flagged trending tweets. The team quickly understood this wasn't a joke that would fade tomorrow, because when a public figure becomes a meme, even for a day, their image changes. And Meghan was about to learn that once the internet turns you into a punchline, getting your seriousness back becomes one of the hardest battles you can fight. While Meghan tried to understand why the internet was laughing, something much bigger was unfolding quietly in the background. Hollywood, the world she hoped to fully re-enter, was watching everything. Executives, producers, brand managers, and agents all pay close attention to public mood. They track trends like stock prices, and when a celebrity suddenly becomes the center of viral jokes, alarms go off. Hollywood doesn't fear criticism, it fears unpredictability. And from their perspective, Meghan's Harper's Bazaar interview, followed by a South Park takedown, made her look unpredictable in the worst possible way. One producer reportedly pointed out that Meghan's public persona kept swinging between inspirational and defensive, poised and dramatic, quiet and theatrical. Brands and studios prefer stability, a consistent image they can build campaigns around. Meghan wasn't giving them that. Worse, the South Park parody exposed something Hollywood had already been whispering about. Her storylines always felt the same: the dramatic self-reflection, the emotional retelling, the poetic language, the misunderstood narrative. And once the cartoon aired, those elements suddenly felt exaggerated instead of empowering. Executives began to wonder whether Meghan truly understood the American audience she was trying to reach. The Harper's Bazaar interview leaned heavily into high drama: metaphors, destiny, reinvention, emotional awakening. But American viewers tend to reward vulnerability and humor, not perfectly polished speeches. That mismatch made the interview feel more like a branding exercise than a genuine moment. And the worst part? South Park captured that mismatch perfectly. They portrayed Meghan giving deep speeches while cameras followed her everywhere. They showed dramatic poses that felt too serious. They poked fun at her reborn image by exaggerating the very tone the Harper's Bazaar article had used. So when Hollywood executives compared the parody to the real interview, the overlap was hard to ignore. That overlap scared them, because when satire and reality look almost identical, the public stops seeing the celebrity as authentic and starts seeing them as a character. Inside Meghan's camp, the temperature rose. Advisors knew that once Hollywood starts to doubt your relatability, opportunities dry up. Not because people dislike you, but because brands and studios avoid anything that makes their audience roll their eyes. And right now, Meghan's narrative was doing exactly that. Her interview wasn't landing the way she hoped, and the parody had magnified every weak spot. Meanwhile, Prince Harry couldn't escape the fallout either. He wasn't sharply targeted, but his cartoon portrayal, confused, reactive, overshadowed, tapped into public criticism that had been building for years. Insiders say Harry felt uneasy, seeing himself reduced to a side character in Meghan's story. Hollywood noticed that too. When a couple is seen as one unit, one person's PR crisis becomes both of their problem. Meghan's team knew the situation had shifted from a funny moment online to a genuine reputational risk. A cartoon episode was now influencing how the entertainment industry viewed her future, and the next blow wasn't going to come from South Park at all. It was going to come from the media, and it was already on its way. Just as Meghan's team tried to manage the fallout from South Park and the growing unease in Hollywood, a new problem surfaced: quiet, subtle, and far more threatening than a cartoon. A major U.S. media outlet, one Meghan had previously considered a safe zone, had begun asking questions. Not soft questions, not promotional questions, investigative questions. It began with a simple request for comment, the kind that usually doesn't mean anything. But then calls started going out to people who had worked on the Harper's Bazaar shoot. Assistants, stylists, freelancers, people with small roles but clear views. The outlet wanted to know how the interview was shaped, who influenced the tone, why the language read more like a dramatic monologue than a typical celebrity profile. They wanted to know if the article was guided or crafted. When word reached Meghan's team, panic flickered instantly. They knew how badly this could go. The Harper's Bazaar piece was already being mocked for its dramatic, overly poetic style, and the South Park episode had highlighted those exact weaknesses. If a major outlet published an investigation suggesting the interview was rehearsed or overly controlled, Meghan wouldn't just look dramatic, she'd look manufactured. Her PR team scrambled. Advisors jumped into late-night discussions, messaging staffers, analyzing what the outlet might already know. One source said the mood felt like trying to put out a fire you can't see, but you can smell. Everyone agreed a follow-up article could be far more damaging than the parody that sparked the mess. Because satire embarrasses you, but an investigation exposes you. Meanwhile, Meghan herself reportedly felt stunned that the Harper's Bazaar interview, something she believed was beautiful and empowering, was being dissected so intensely. She saw it as art, as expression, as storytelling. But the public didn't want art. They wanted honesty. And when a narrative feels too perfect, too polished, people start questioning what's real. Then came another blow. In a casual podcast appearance, the South Park writers joked that they wouldn't mind revisiting Meghan's storyline if more material came along. It wasn't a promise, but it was a warning. Meghan's team understood exactly what it meant. If she generated more dramatic content, they'd turn it into comedy, and the internet would devour it. The fear inside her camp grew. Meghan didn't want to become a recurring character. Being mocked once is bad. Being mocked twice is unforgettable. Anyone who becomes a running joke on South Park carries that reputation for years. Her team drafted scenario maps. What to do if the investigative story dropped. What to do if more comedians joined in. What to do if public sentiment kept shifting. But every scenario had one common theme. Meghan's image was no longer fully in her control. Her Harper's Bazaar interview was supposed to reopen doors and reset opinions. Instead, it triggered the media, the memes, the comedy world, and now a potential investigation. The storm was far from over, and the next wave would hit her where she feared it most, her long-term public image. As the days passed, Meghan's team tried to get ahead of the situation, but the storm didn't calm. It spread. The Harper's Bazaar interview, once meant to be a carefully polished comeback, had transformed into the centerpiece of an internet spectacle. Every tweet, every clip, every meme seemed to drift further from the elegant narrative Meghan had tried so hard to build. But the worst part wasn't the mockery itself. It was how quickly it became the public's new reference point for who Meghan Markle was. The most damaging moment came when social media users started posting side-by-side comparisons. Meghan's real, Harper's Bazaar photos next to South Park's exaggerated versions. The lighting, the poses, the solemn expression, the resemblance was uncanny. It was as if the parody hadn't distorted anything at all, just held a mirror at a slightly sharper angle. The internet noticed, Hollywood noticed, and Meghan noticed. But the real impact wasn't in the jokes. It was in the long-term ripple effect. Because when South Park turns you into a character, you don't escape it. You live next to it. Whenever Meghan tries to launch a new project, people will remember the parody. Whenever she gives another interview, viewers will listen for the dramatic wording South Park mocked. Whenever she poses for another photo shoot, comparisons will pop up instantly. It doesn't matter how polished or serious or heartfelt her next project is. The internet now has a filter for how to interpret it, and that filter is comedy. Inside Meghan's home, sources say the mood shifted from frustration to fear. Not fear of the cartoon, but fear of what this meant for her future. Meghan has always relied on storytelling to shape her public image. It's how she built her early career, how she navigated royal life, and how she presented her post-royal identity. But once people stop believing the story, even the most dramatic retelling loses its power. Prince Harry felt the shift too. Even though he wasn't the center of the parody, he wasn't spared. His cartoon version seemed lost, supportive yet overshadowed, reacting instead of leading, a portrayal that echoed public criticism he has struggled to shake. Conferences in Hollywood had already begun, quietly questioning his ability to carry projects independently. Now, the parody only deepened those doubts. Then came the biggest blow of all, silence from the places Meghan expected sympathy. No major outlets rushed to defend her. No celebrities voiced outrage on her behalf. No PR allies attempted to redirect the narrative. It wasn't abandonment, it was calculation. Hollywood doesn't protect someone caught in a PR wildfire. They step back and wait to see if the smoke clears. And as the South Park episode continued to dominate online spaces, the silence around Meghan spoke louder than any headline. The Harper's Bazaar cover was meant to be her triumphant reset, a moment of rebirth. Instead, it may have become a defining turning point. The moment her image slipped away from her control and into the hands of the internet. Because rebuilding a reputation is hard. Rebuilding one that has become a meme is almost impossible.